A thick fog clung to the gray water like an old shawl, softening the jagged skyline. The RMS Celtic, her hull streaked from weeks at sea, eased into the busy harbor with the slow majesty of a cathedral ship. Steam hissed from her valves. Gulls shrieked overhead, their white wings flashing like loose pages in the wind.
Antonio Bellini stood on the crowded deck, his worn suitcase wedged between his boots. He clutched his coat tighter against the damp Atlantic air, eyes fixed on the tall green statue that rose out of the mist. America, he thought, rolling the word in his mind as if tasting a new wine. His fingers smelled faintly of sewing chalk, the scent of the trade he'd learned from his father in Naples.
Not far away, another man leaned against the railing. Samuel Rosenfeld, a Jewish baker from Warsaw. His hands, broad and dusted with flour no matter how often he washed, rested on the rail as he watched tugs maneuver between ferries, barges, and coal steamers. Samuel's journey had been quieter than Antonio's. He carried little more than a canvas sack of clothes and a family recipe book written in Yiddish. His wife and child would follow if his bakery could find a foothold in the new world.
They did not speak. They might have brushed shoulders without noticing just two of thousands. But on Ellis Island, a small accident occurred. A harried clerk, juggling sheaves of forms, swapped their registration lines for a moment, mistaking Antonio for Samuel. Their papers lay together on the clerk's desk. Bellini atop Rosenfeld, before the mistake was caught and corrected. Neither man thought much of it. But in a city of millions, such a moment was already an invisible knot in the threads of their lives. Chapter 1. The Tenement Web.
Antonio's first nights were spent in a Mulberry Street tenement, a brick fortress of cracked plaster and peeling paint. His room smelled of coal smoke, cabbage, and damp wool. The landlord, a stout Sicilian with a voice like a saw, gave him work mending overcoats in a tiny ground-floor shop, whose single window rattled when streetcars passed.
Outside, life pulsed in quick bursts. Women scrubbed stoops with buckets of soapy water. Ragged boys chased each other between horse carts. A hurdy-gurdy man turned his crank beside a dancing monkey in a red vest. The air was thick with garlic from basement kitchens and the metallic tang of the blacksmith's forge at the corner.
Just 2 streets away, Samuel's fortunes began in the dim cellar of a bakery. The shop upstairs belonged to an older German baker named Herr Vogel, who allowed Samuel to use the basement oven for his own bread in exchange for labor during the day. Samuel rose at 3 each morning, stoking the fire until the bricks glowed. The warmth was welcome in the biting dawn, though the air downstairs was a stew of yeast, ash, and damp stone.
One chilly afternoon,
Antonio stepped out for a breath of air, brushing chalk from his sleeves. He turned the corner just as a wicker basket tipped.
From a pushcart outside Vogel's bakery, loaves tumbled onto the muddy street. Samuel cursed softly in Polish and bent to retrieve them.
Antonio crouched beside him, brushing off one loaf with his sleeve before handing it over. "Grazie," Antonio said.
"Dziękuję," Samuel replied.
Smiling faintly though, neither understood the other's words. They nodded and went on their ways. Around the block, in a dim corner of Doyle's saloon, Tammany Hall, ward boss Patrick Flaherty met with a uniformed police sergeant. Their voices were low but sharp, muffled beneath the squeak of fiddle music and the thump of billiard balls. In the far corner, unnoticed, a young reporter named Clara Whitfield scribbled in her notebook, catching stray phrases like election list and don't worry about the raids. Chapter 2. Smoke and Silk. Clara was 29, with dark hair always pinned too neatly for the neighborhood's liking. She worked for the New York Evening Star, mostly covering labor unrest and tenement reform. One rainy Thursday, while rushing between interviews, she snagged her skirt hem on a loose nail in the tram. Seeking a quick fix, she ducked into Antonio's shop. The tailor worked in silence, his needle flashing in the lamplight. As he turned the fabric, Clara noticed a peculiar detail, a monogram stitched in faded gold thread along the seam. She had seen it before, embroidered on a silk scarf left behind at the scene of a warehouse fire the police were calling accidental. She said nothing, but the connection planted a seed in her mind.
Meanwhile, Samuel was selling fresh rolls to a thick-set man with slick hair and a pinstripe suit.
This was Vito Morelli, a lieutenant in the Black Hands operations downtown.
Morelli liked Samuel's bread and paid in cash, always using the bakery's rear entrance. Samuel suspected nothing beyond a taste for privacy.
At night, the city's heart beat faster. Gas lamps flickered along Broadway. The elevated train clattered overhead, showering sparks as it curved toward the Bowery. Outside vaudeville houses, posters promised comedians, singers, and magicians. Somewhere a brass band rehearsed for a parade, its sound carrying over the rooftops. Chapter 3. The Tycoon's Party. That winter, invitations began to circulate for an extravagant soiree at the Fifth Avenue mansion of steel magnate Cornelius Hargrave. Known for his philanthropy, libraries, hospitals, even a public fountain, Hargrave's fortune was whispered to rest on ruthless contracts and quiet political favors. Clara received an invite through the Star. Samuel was hired to supply bread rolls for the buffet. Antonio was commissioned to alter gowns for 3 society ladies attending the event. The mansion glittered under electric lights, a novelty that made guests gasp. Marble columns soared toward a gold leaf ceiling. A string quartet played in the corner while servants in white gloves moved like chess pieces between the guests. During the evening, Clara overheard a drunken alderman confide in a young woman. Hargrave's charitable donations were just sugar to hide the rot. The money that kept the police friendly and the Morelli gang thriving came from the same pocket. In the kitchen, Samuel brushed past Antonio carrying a tray of rolls. Recognition flickered between them. "You again," Samuel said in accented English. Antonio grinned. "Small city," he replied. Neither man knew yet how small it could be. Chapter 4. The Subway Affair. A week later, Clara boarded the IRT subway at City Hall, notebook in hand. The air in the station was thick with damp stone and oil, the rumble of approaching trains echoing like distant thunder. In the same car sat Samuel with a wicker basket of bread deliveries, Antonio with a canvas bag of altered suits, and one of Morel Lie's men carrying a plain brown envelope. Midway to 14th Street, the lights flickered, then died. The train shuddered to a stop in darkness. Murmurs rose in the car, someone struck a match, and faces appeared in the brief flare of light. Strangers spoke to pass the time. Clara, Samuel, and Antonio traded stories, piecing together the odd overlaps in their recent weeks. The man with the envelope shifted uncomfortably as Clara casually mentioned Hargrave's name and the subway's construction contracts. Samuel recalled Morel Lie's backdoor visits. Antonio remembered the monogrammed scarf. Threads began to weave into a picture. When the lights returned and the train lurched forward, Clara's mind was already racing toward her next column. 2 weeks later, the Star ran Clara's expose across the front page. Tycoon's ties to gang exposed. Police complicit Hargrave denied everything, of course. But the public uproar was enough to shake loose a few honest investigations. Morelli disappeared from his usual haunts. The sergeant transferred to a quieter precinct uptown. Samuel's Bakery, once just a cellar room, became a gathering place for reform-minded policemen and civic leaders. Antonio's shop found steady work among respectable clients who valued discretion. A year later, under spring blossoms in Central Park, Samuel's niece married Antonio's nephew. Guests from both families laughed at the coincidences that had brought them together. But only Clara, standing quietly at the back, understood how much of the city's tangled fate could hinge on a dropped loaf of bread, a torn hem, and a darkened subway ride. And somewhere, far uptown, Cornelius Hargrave poured himself another drink, staring out at the city that still hummed, schemed, and collided under its own restless stars.